Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Sherry.
Good
Hey,
afternoon,
Kira.
actually.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Nice to see you all again.
Absolutely.
We're very happy to have here Sarah, who has been a consultant for some years, with some years of seniority, working extensively on the front lines of implementations on premise, in the cloud, in all situations. So we thought it would be a great discussion to have. She's leading a part of the Deloitte practice, particularly focused on success factors. And we are very happy to have you, Sarah.
It's great to be here with you.
Welcome, Sarah.
And we thought we would dedicate a little bit of time on the different styles of projects as you have experienced them in the early part of your career, and now on the cloud. And I'm really curious to hear your feedback.
Oh, yeah. As you said, my implementation started all the way 1992, so over 31 years ago. So I've implemented SAP R2. I've gone to R3, now to cloud, success factors, and even some S4, H4, S4. And seen a lot of projects. I've come in some projects where they weren't going so well and done some firefighting. So, and looked at a lot of different ways of implementing. And I think, the way we used to do it, the ASAP way, we'd go in and we'd get all the requirements and we'd write it down in paper and it was done. We'd go away in a little room, black room, and we'd develop everything and come out and say, here it is, and it's done, right? And they say, wait a second, that's not what we said. Or, oops, we forgot that and that and that. And you didn't find it out until testing. But I think projects have evolved now, and there's a bit of a difference because agile, you can do, your recruitment or your performance management a bit more agile. But if you're talking about payroll or workforce management, you need to know what you're looking at. You need the big picture before you get started. And then you need to break it down into chunks because otherwise it's just too big. So the way I like to approach these projects nowadays is more of a hybrid way. So I go in waterfall, I find out what the big picture is, and then I get started and then work agilely to show them, look, we've done this is what it looks like, and this is what it means. And so when we get all the way to the testing, we don't have the surprises like, oops, we forgot this, or, oh no, that's not what we said. And so there are a few surprises and a lot less risks later on.
More communication earlier in the game.
Oh yeah, definitely. And they're seeing it. And so that's part of your change management. And so for them as well, there's no surprises right before they go live.
Right.
And that has worked out well.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the best of both worlds to some extent.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest changes between, the implementations we used to do on premise and the cloud? Is it change management? Is it, process changes? Is it data management? Are they all equally the same?
I think people are starting to focus a bit more on change management. I did 2 huge automotive companies in Germany. One said, no, we don't need change management. We'll tell our employees what they need to do and they'll do it. We went live. I had people screaming at me and I'm going, wait a second, calm down. Let's show you this again. Oh, it works. But it took us 6 months until they calmed down and say, oh, yes, this. And we said, do you want your old system back? No. This is great. But that it took us that time to get them to calm down. And the other one, we started day 1 with this change management. And a month after we went live, the team leads came up to us and thanked us for this wonderful tool. It was so quiet. It was like, are they live? But that's the power of change management. And I think before, a lot of companies did not look at it. And I think cloud is even more because more people are involved in the processes than they used to be. Because before, you would have only you'd want to sell as few licenses, they'd buy as few licenses as possible. So you only had your experts on the system. But now
Right.
you have your experts, you have your managers, you have your employees, you have other people on there. And so you need to do a lot more change management on these projects.
I like to think and I like to repeat that HR today is the only kind of IT tool that is really speaking to every person, not only every employee, but potentially every worker in the organization. And that's a huge population.
Oh,
Yeah.
That
I think
makes
it's actually probably a really good starting point if you're doing any kind of major ERP change too, to S/4HANA, whether it's private, public cloud. Because, well, one, what I know is that SuccessFactors, our cloud that we've all worked with, has the processes down so tight for releases and everything that, and how we implement, it's different implementing cloud. That, the rest of the ERP world hasn't really delved into as much as we have. So I think you have that, but then you also have your entire workforce sees this system, sees how it works pretty as responsive and all. And so it's a great starting point.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also the beauty of the cloud is a lot of times you do have a lot more predefined things. I would always say I never go to a workshop where you have a blank piece of paper. I would say, okay, this is an ideal situation, an ideal process, a best practice almost. And then work from there to see where the differences are. And ideally, if you can show those in the system and say, okay, where are you different? It's easier. And then say, and explain to them what the consequences are of making these changes. No, we have to have it this way. Well, why? Because that's going to cost you 10 times as much, or, oh, this is going to have impact later on in this process, this process, or this process. It's easier to discuss if you're seeing the pictures instead of just discussing from a piece of paper. And, it's funny because we were discussing about what's dangerous, and what we see a lot of times, sometimes when people go out and make proposals, they say, oh, we can do it very inexpensive because we're just going to give you best practice and we're going to do one iteration and it's going to fit your company. And I'm going, that's dangerous, because you'll do one iteration and then you're going to be spending a lot of extra on change requests because you are going to need to tweak it to fit your needs. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that always bothered me about implementations is don't have this mentality either that it's once and done.
Yeah.
Especially not with cloud, changes come through all the time. You have to understand your system and your processes and continually be able to use those enhancements.
Yeah. Exactly.
And in line with that, then the other part that I see continuously striked out from SOWs, from proposal, from everything, is all the part of change management that you were talking a moment ago, Sarah.
Yeah.
That's the part that's everybody feels that's a nice to have, but when it is a nice to have, it doesn't get done at all.
Correct.
And nobody owns it in the end.
We pay more on the back end later for not investing in the front end in change management.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm a
Sarah,
true believer.
I was wondering about, because you had quite a lot of international experience and we are trying to look at things from a global keyhole. And I was wondering, have you noticed any differences between the way things are handled in different regions? And that can be in the same company or in companies that are headquarters in different areas.
Definitely, because, a lot of companies now, they're saying, okay, before it was always, oh, payroll, workforce management, we're going to go with best of breed, because of localization. And now they're doing their implementations in the cloud and saying, we don't want to interface to 60 different payroll solutions. We don't want to do all these different workforce management solutions. How do we, kind of harmonize this? How do we, and what we're seeing a lot of times is then headquarters will say, okay, we're picking one tool and one tool will fit all. I'm going, yes and no. especially when it comes to workforce management, there's a lot of different philosophies on how workforce management works. So we see the Americas, a tool will work, and EMEA, a tool will work, or Asia Pacific. And it's because of the philosophies of the way they do workforce management. And then, of course, the payrolls. What we're seeing is more of these platforms that are coming out that kind of put a layer on top of it. So you're doing one interface, but you have the platform underneath it that coordinates all of the payrolls. And that's what we're seeing. And that's kind of evening out almost this difference across borders. Yeah.
That's interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
You mean the payrolls?
Platform. Yeah. The
Yeah.
payroll platforms.
There are providers out there that have this platform. So if you're a global payroll owner, you can go in and see what your costs are per country and when what's been done and do comparisons. So you've got your data layer on top that you can see across the boards. And you put the data in centrally, and then that gets sent out to local engines, basically.
Okay.
And some of those engines, depending on what the provider is, you could even do those payrolls in-house if you wanted to. And other platform providers say, no, we've got our people that would do it for you. You just provide the data. So, but the interesting thing is they basically have one way of getting the data there. So you're not doing multiple types. So most of your data that, because everywhere you go, you're going to need a handful of exactly the same data for payroll. You've got to have the first name, last name, you've got to have the address, you've got to, what's the bank account or check. There's a handful of information that's always going to go. Of course, each country, you're going to need a bit of extra information. But it's kind of standardizing it a bit.
Exactly. That sounds like you're standardizing the data layer, and not only the data layer, but also the process that gets the data layer in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then from there, it can go local. And I guess it could as well be grouped with some countries in the same tool or in the same approach. And when there is no availability of a localization or something like that, it can at that point be externalized or outsourced, depending on how it is decided. I always need to repeat things to myself to understand them.
No, it makes sense, and I like to hear it a different way too. That is a really interesting concept. It's similar to some work I did years ago for payroll. Just really clearly defined. Yeah.
Because you're looking at these large global internationals, and they said, we don't want to be dealing with 16 different vendors. We don't want to be, worried about our compliance in these areas. We need to be able to do some comparisons. What are our benefits like? And so it's basically always been a challenge trying to find that out. And also your workforce management. And the beauty of, if you, at least regionally, if you can't do it globally, if you have your regional solutions, you can have teams that can support that, or when you're rolling out, let's say, to a new country that's right next door, you can have a foundation and say, okay, this is our standard processes, and then add the localization to it, and you can have a huge savings on that. Because we have some very quickly growing companies over here in Europe that are going into a lot of the other countries, and they say, okay, our standard work pattern is 40 hours, and this is how we do it, and this is, the rules and regulations, which are very similar over here in Europe. And so they take it and say, okay, here it is. What are the differences? And they have a quick start, so that it's not a 6 to 9 month project like it used to be, but maybe a 2 to 3 month project just to put in the data.
Right.
That's sizable as a change. And actually, that's a pretty neat segue into what I had in mind to prompt you on. And that's because as a way of closing our discussion, I was wondering how you close a project. And when you close a project, you are moving on to support. So how do you find support is changing? The support of the go live and the support of the live tools.
That is the actual part that really doesn't change that much, because you're always going to have hypercare because they're going to need that extra support when they're going live. We do see that a lot of companies are saying, we just don't want to keep this in-house. They want an application maintenance support, AMS. They don't want to keep the techies in the house. So yes, we do see a bit more of that growing. But at the same time, in some cases, when it comes to, again, workforce management, you don't want to be calling in, a team every time you want a new work schedule. This is why, if you can kind of bundle some of that you can keep in-house, but keep it simple. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes completely sense. And I think we've seen it. Cheryl, is it in any way congruent also with your experience?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm just, as Sarah was talking, I was thinking, everything used to feel so different from company to company, from country to country. And this whole idea of this data layer, really getting back to that, is what brings in a lot of commonalities. So, I mean, years ago when we were first running payroll, we had people in-house that knew the employees, knew how they were paid, knew all the nuances, and you needed them, by golly. If with this more consistent data layer in between, it certainly creates more opportunities to have that kind of application managed services, maintenance services, manage your content, manage the output, which could be a great savings to companies.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's hard to replace those people. That was the
Yeah.
hard thing. They didn't, nobody ever wanted to let them go because they had all this stuff up here in their heads,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's really the win of an outline, a standardized process.
Yeah.
And that's true in any area, even more true when it comes to payroll, when it comes to complex area, but even in processes that are relatively more simple, such as goal and performance. The fact of having one process, one date line, one approach is helpful, and it means that the reply you get from a centralized service is relevant for everybody and not just for a small group and changing wherever you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's that magic about it, that it needs to be that different.
Yeah. I mean, you're always going to need some of those experts, because you're always going to have those really tricky cases in payroll. Definitely.
Yep. And the unions tend to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Tracking
Coming from Germany. Yeah. So.
Well, not only in Germany.
Oh, yeah, a few of the others, but because of the co-determination, instead of just informing the works councils, but, getting them to actually sign off on it, just adds the extra layer of complexity and, yeah.
Makes sense.
But the funny thing is, I do
Well-
see a change there as well.
Really?
Recently with the works council, I went in because I'm a huge fan of employee self-services and involving the employees, because they want to be able to participate in the planning of how they're working and being able to swap shifts and, and so I'm recommending it to this company in one of the sites, and the site managers, oh, no, we can't do that to the employee. No, that's not going to work. And a guy from the Works Council was at the table, and he looked at him, he says, but that's what our employees want. And so before, where it was like the Works Councils were always stopping things, no, you can't do this. They're saying, we want this. We want you to move forward, because it's in the interest of the employees, and it's in their interest as well to be able to plan and, work-life balance. We talk about that. And so we're seeing changes there, which I think are quite good.
It is a huge shift from the
Mhm.
traditional approach. And it's good to see, actually,
Shift.
that it's really in the interest of people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your input and for your time. It has been fabulous talking to you. Sherry, any closing remarks?
No, it's just this whole idea of global payroll we brought up years ago, Kiara, if you remember when we were working with ASUG, and there was no such thing. There still is no such thing because countries are different. But the answer seems to be more in how you handle the data. So very
We're getting there.
interesting.
We're getting there.
Thank you, Sarah.
My pleasure. Great talking to you all again.
Thank you, everybody. And you both have been fabulous. And I'm looking forward to our next discussion.
Take care.
Good to see you both
Talk to you
again.
then. Bye-bye.
Bye.